This is the brand new Pioneer DJ DDJ-REV7, the first DJ controller ever from Pioneer DJ with motorized platters and a whole lot more as well. And before we begin, I'm just going to cut to a little teaser of a video we've got with our tutor, DJ Jazzy Jeff, showing this thing off. Thanks, Jeff, and you can see the whole of that video as well on this channel. There's a link in the description and I'll also give it to you at the end. So you could see Jeff enjoying this, and with good reason. This is a pretty revolutionary new controller. In short, what you get in here is the equivalent of 2 turntables or 2, say, Rain 12s, 2 motorized platters, and a full-sized battle stroke scratch mixer like a DJ MS7, 9, 11, and they're all in one easy portable unit that is yet still big enough to be seriously considered by pro DJs to use instead of carting around or specifying 2 controllers and a DJ MS mixer on their riders. I mean, that is what we're looking at here, and that's why it's a game changer. We're going to look in a lot of detail at every feature of this in this review. We're going to look at the decks, we're going to look at these new sections at the top of the decks. You can see we've got the pitch faders here because it's in 90-degree battle mode. We're going to look at the mixer, what's on it, what isn't on it compared to the DJ MS mixers, and I'm going to give you some overall thoughts at the end. Look, it's $18.99 and you're getting an awful lot for your money here. For a lot of DJs who are used to playing with turntables and a scratch mixer, this could be the controller you've been waiting for. Let's begin by looking at the decks. The decks are lovely. It's the first time anyone has built a controller with decks that have the battle layout with the pitch fader at the top, and it's almost like, duh, you know, that's the way turntables are laid out by anyone using a DJ MS mixer, so why not do it on a controller? And so that, again, in the same way that on the entry-level Rev1 that's been launched at the same time as this, frees up all this space to be a nice big platter. Now these are 7-inch platters, which are the same as the other obvious competitor to this, the Rain 1, same size platters, but the big difference here is that these have been engineered so that you don't need the spindle in the middle and the chunk that kind of holds the spindle in place, holds the platter in place on the spindle. And what that gives you is a couple of things. It gives you a bigger surface to manipulate, so you're not worried about this thing in the middle because of course it's not a full-size platter, so there's less to go for, but also it gives you this screen in the middle, and this screen in the middle is something that's unique on a motorized platter. So what does it do for us? So at the moment you can see we've got the waveform in the middle of the screen, and if you look at the other screen you can see that we've got vertical parallel waveforms going on there. We've got a narrow one that shows us what's going on the other deck, and we've got a big one that shows us what's going on this deck. These waveforms can be zoomed in and zoomed out by holding down Shift and pressing these buttons here. So I'm zooming in to the waveform there and out to the waveform there to give us a different granularity. But you can also do the same on your software, and they're independent. So doing that on there is not going to do it on the software and vice versa. So you have those 2 choices there for the waveforms. But there are other display modes here as well. To alter the display modes, you hold down the Shift button and you press these here. So we can cycle through a few of the things we've got here. Here you can see you've got your BPM and so on. Here we've got our artwork, which is quite nice. And here we're kind of back to a default Pioneer mode. I'm going to guess that over time they're going to evolve these a little bit, but that's what we get right now. Now also, you can turn on or off your guide here just by double tapping here, and they provide you with, if you want to do it the old school way, a set of stickers that you can attach to your vinyl here if that's the way you'd prefer to do it, but you get the option there on there. So another thing that you can move through the track very quickly by holding down Shift and going like this, and you can see it scrolling both on my screen and on the little screen here. So there's no touch strip to scroll your track there. You can just do that by holding down shift, which is just as intuitive really. And finally for the decks, we have a stop time here, so you can have the track stop nice and short, or you can do the old end of night, turn the power off stop there. Up to you how you have that set. Worth pointing out that in my experiments, I think this is pretty instant start. There is a silent cue mode, which we'll get on to talk about a little bit later, but I think that's instant in the same way it is on the Rain 12, so you don't have to worry about kind of slurring start when you start a deck using the start stop button. So one thing you don't get on two turntables shoved against the mixer, of course, is the top section. So let's look at this top section here and what controls are here. Now, of course, on a deck, you do get the pitch control up here, assuming you've turned it around 90 degrees. So we have the pitch control along with a reset button and a tempo range. First time I've seen a reset button on a controller at all in memory, so that's pretty cool. But other stuff here is kind of new. So we've got key lock. We also have a sync button. Again, this is something that actually you do get it on the DJ MS11, I think, but it's on the touch screen. We've got hard buttons for sync here if you want to use this in sync mode. These are the library controls. Again, this is the same as this. These sections are no different. They're exactly the same on both sides. So you've got two loading areas here with all the usual controls, prepare and back and view and so on here. Now, looping is here. Now this, yeah, it's unusual to have it there, but I think you'll get used to it reasonably quickly. It's one of the few places where muscle memory is going to fail you on this if you're used to using turntables and a mixer. So you're just going to have to get used to where your loops are. Then we have slip and sensor. Again, there certainly isn't a slip mode on the DJ MS mixers. I'm pretty sure there's no sensor either. So that's new. Now we've got the usual key functions here for moving your key up and down, syncing it and resetting it. Now this is the big first new feature I want to show you in this area that is definitely worth a little demo. It's called Instant Scratch, and Pioneer DJ has built into this unit scratch sounds and loops. There are 4 of them, and you could unplug Serato and they'd still be in here. So you're going to see why this is cool. So I'll turn Instant Scratch on, and then I'm going to choose one of my samples here. Let's pick this one. Now this isn't changing anything on the software, it's just grayed out the software because this is a hardware function. And if you look on the screen, you can see my scratch sample is here, and it's looping. That scratch sample is looping, so I can grab it, do my thing with it. Now you get, I mean, that is the classic R sound, but not quite, right? This is one of the things about this. You also have a few things to choose from there. When we move on to 3 and 4, and especially 4, you have a complete loop there. Now what that means is that on the other side, you can chuck in a sample and scratch without having any software attached at all. What a great thing to be able to just quickly switch it on and practice scratching. And we all know that with a loop and a couple of scratch sounds, you could spend hours and hours on it. So I think that's really, really nice. They're in firmware and you can't change them. So there's no going on there and putting in your favorite scratch sounds. You are stuck with what's there. But there's a couple of other functions here as well, because of course we are talking about a software controller. So by pressing hot cue here, now these are simply triggering my first 4 hot cues. In the same way that that happens on the pads, we'll move to the pads later. So this is really good for a couple of reasons. The first reason is that you've got easy access to your hot cues here, right by where you might be doing other stuff with your hand. So you can be triggering hot cues and scratching without having to move over to the mixer, which is nice in itself. But also, when we get onto the pads, you'll realize, because I'll tell you again, that there's no split pad mode. So you can't do what you can do on some of the standalone mixers, which is have your cues at the top and your rolls at the bottom, or whatever you choose. You're stuck with all 8. But that's not really that big an issue, because you can have 4 hot cues there permanently. So you could have this set to your flips or your slicer loop or whatever, while you've still got access to your first 4 hot cues. So that's actually quite nice, and it's not really a limitation. But there's more, because you can also switch into the scratch bank. And so you've got access to your scratch bank here, and also the sampler. By holding down shift and pressing this button, you can trigger samples from here as well, and indeed save loops if you want to. So this is really versatile, software and hardware. A great new feature, and the first time that's appeared on anything, instant scratch. Now, as befits a controller with lots of things you can tweak, there's a utility menu, and the way you get into that is up here. So let's cover it off while we're in this area. You hold down the back button, and that will move the utility menu onto this screen here, and then you use the library browse, where now it's not browsing the library, it's going through all these settings: trigger, beats, level. You've got your microphone echo beats there. You turn your auto standby and your screensaver on and off if you don't like the Vegas mode. 2 torque motor settings, so you can have the motor how you like the feel of it, and other things, microphone torque over, all the usual stuff that you'd find in the utility settings on a mixer. They're all here for you to choose here, and indeed on the deck as well. So lots and lots of stuff for you to get stuck into there and get it working just how you want. Okay, I want to talk to you now about the mixer, and let's divide it up into the kind of 3 sections. We'll talk about the bottom first. So this is a classic DJM-S style mixer. It's the correct width. This is a really differentiating point of this controller to controllers that have come before it in this kind of style, because the mixer's not been compromised. It's not narrow, it's not something you're not used to using. If you've ever used a DJM-S mixer, hey, you've got a DJM-S mixer here. You saw Jazzy Jeff using this at the beginning of this review. We literally put it in, now he is DJ Jazzy Jeff of course, but we literally put it in front of him. He plugged it in and did that demo for us after maybe 5 minutes of saying, just gonna check where everything is. So if you're used to using this kind of thing, you're gonna love this, no learning curve. Down the bottom here then, classic layout. We've got a lot of space around our crossfader. There's a crossfader feel adjust, which I'll show you the front and back of this unit in a little while, but there's a crossfader feel adjust down here on the front. It's basically what you're used to seeing and what you're used to using. The usual level and the usual, as is the style, you've got a fader rather than a knob for your cue from channel 1 to channel 2 there. It's got the smooth echo on it from the DJM-S11. So this is an echo that you can trigger by another action. It could be pulling a fader up or down, it could be the crossfader, it could be the silent cue. And the idea of this is that you're doing a routine, you don't want any echo on it. As soon as that thing happens that signifies the end of your routine, that echo comes in. And it's just something that, you know, it's a classic piece of feedback from scratch DJs. I'm always having to go up here to find the echo to end my routine, and that was a new thing on the S11. It's come across here perfectly in the way that you remember it. You can watch our S11 review video if you want an extensive demo of that, but it's really nice to see it there. So if we move up then from here, I'll come to the pads afterwards. I want to talk to you about the top of the mixer. So again, we've got the classic layout where you've got your 3 EQs, but then off to the side you've got your filter and your trim. At the top here you can choose between the 2 DJs that can plug in at the same time, USB-A and USB-B, and also the phono line. Again, we'll talk about the inputs and outputs in a little while. But the main thing up here, of course, is the effects. So you've got your classic paddles with your lock and your momentary on, depending on whether you push it up or down. So you get hardware effects and control over software effects. The hardware effects are 22 effects built in, of which you can have any 6 on the buttons at any given time. So we've got labeled up echo, spin, flanger, reverb, break and duck down. You're going to have your favorites and think, why did they put this spin on a button? They could have put something else there or whatever. But the point is you can change them to what you want. So before we do that, I want to show you duck down, because duck down is something that I've not heard before. Nice, right? Now you get parameters on all the effects. So your classic parameters are adjusting the effect cycle, but also you have got an extra parameter by holding down shift. This is just like on the DJM-S mixers, and then the extra parameter that in duck down, it's fade out, but it could be depending on the thing you've got set. So you've got your filter on your reverb to decide how much high pass filter is applied to it as it's kicking in and so on. So they're all there as you'd expect, but it's not only about the hardware. Oh, and to change the hardware effects, you hold down and then you turn the encoder, and you can see that I'm now changing this particular effect to the one I want to choose. As I said, there's 22 of them. To switch to the software effects, shift, hold down the software effect button there. Now we're on software effects. So now we've got 3 software effects for each side, as is the way Serato is configured. So now they're independent, whereas before, if I selected an effect in hardware, both paddles would be set to that effect and to how that effect was set up. Now they're independent, so I can have anything I want on each side. And you can actually change them just by holding down the button and then turning the knob, and then you can see in Serato there it's picking the effect I want. And again, we have our usual parameters here, and you don't get a second parameter on the Serato effects, but you do get the ability to turn on more than one at once by holding down all the buttons you want at the same time before you take your hands off. So I've got all 3 effects on there. And the other thing I haven't mentioned, but which is hopefully reasonably obvious, you've got your effects level there to decide how much you want to dial the effect in, and that of course works across all the effects. Now again, if you want to see these effects more closely, go and look at our DJ MS11 review, but there is one that isn't in anything else apart from the one I've already shown you. So before we move on, I just want to show you that one. So let's go back to our hardware effects. I'm going to pick a effect that is that's ripe for me to put something new in. I'm going to go for the brake effect and change that for something else. Hold this down and then turn here, and I'm going to find an effect which is called, and there's 22 to choose from, which is great. You've got lots and lots of choice here. But the one I want is one that's called fill out. Now fill out is an effect which gives you loads and loads of choices of, well, it's best if I just play it to you. So let's get this on here dialed in all the way so you can hear it really obviously. And I can change the parameter here to get that pattern to something different. So let's just jump back to a cue point where there's a beat. And you've got lots and lots to play with there. I really think that's nice, and I think we're going to hear DJs using that an awful lot in their routines as soon as they get their hands on this thing. It's so cool to be able to say to you, go and watch our S11 review if you want to see some of this stuff, because that's one of the big selling points of this. It's so similar to the gear you know and love, but shoved together. So that makes my job easy when I'm talking you through the pads. But that said, let's just have a little look at them. So of course you've got your hot cues on pad number 1, which is going to set your hot cues to wherever you want to set them to. We've got loop roll on pad number 2. Pad setting number 2, of course. And the parameters will give you movement around what's available there. You can save loops on here, of course, so you just set a loop and then you hit there and you save that loop there to come back to. You can get your sampler here. I've got my scratch samples on the sampler at the moment. You can get to your scratch bank here as well. You've got pitch play, so pitch play will get me to my first cue point, which is actually not very musical, but you can hear that going up and down at least. And the parameter will move you around the various options you've got. This is my non-pitch affected button, that's why it's white. I mean, this is all stuff that you will have seen before if you've watched any reviews of this stuff that we've done. You've also got your slicer loop. Slicer loop is famously the one thing which I never demo because I can never make it sound good, but hey, if you can, go for it. You can save flips on here as well. What I liked about flip on here, so flip, if you don't know what it is a way of saving a cue point play. You play a track and you do some cool stuff on your cue points and it'll save it as an alternative version of the track and you can play that back. So for instance, you might chop up a riff or you might just double the length of an intro. Flip is a great feature that's exclusive to Serato. But what I liked about here is that you can do it all on the buttons. You don't have to go over there. So you can basically record a flip and then assign it to a button and turn it on and off all within here using combinations of the parameter buttons and shift and the buttons when you're in flip mode, which is by holding down shift and going like that. And sample banks in there as well. So basically everything you're used to, and I keep saying it, go to the S11 video if you want more info on all this stuff. We cover it all. Now, just remember that you're not going to get a combi mode on here. You can't hold down hot cue and roll and get top and bottom buttons to give you those two functions, but you can do it by having this set to hot cue, save loop, scratch bank, sampler, whatever you want on there, and then you can use the pads for something else. So while it's different, you're not really that limited. I think for most use cases, that's going to be just fine. So let's look from the left-hand side down here. We've got the microphone section here, 2 mics, off, on, and talk over. Remember, you can adjust the talk over in the utilities that we looked at on the screen. You also have a 2-band EQ and an echo effect there. These things affect both microphones at the same time. Moving over to the center, as you'd think with a mixer that is in the DJ MS lineage, you've got lots and lots of controls of your faders and crossfaders. So the crossfader controls are in the middle. You've got the reverse. You've also got feeling adjust, which is nice to give you a tougher or smoother response on the crossfader, and of course the crossfader curve. And then you've got the curves and reverse for both of the up faders as well. 1/4 and 1/8 inch headphone socket here, and then an auxiliary. We're going to go around the back in a second, but you get not only the level control, but line and portable. So if you're plugging in a portable device like your phone or whatever, you can get the level slightly more suited to that as opposed to a normal line input by just hitting that switch there. So around the back, here's our power input. It's a 9-volt input with an external transformer. Our on-off and standby, 2 microphone inputs. One is a combi jack, one is a TRS balanced, and they've both got an attenuator there to trim them on the way in should you need to. Here's our auxiliary input, which is an RCA. And then we have our 2 channel inputs here, because you can switch the channels on the top over to phono and line, and then patch these in if you wish as well into your mix. And these 2 RCA inputs here have a line phono switch to decide whether it's record deck you've got plugged in there, maybe with an earth connected to the signal ground, or CDJs or whatever. So 2 USBs, 2 independent laptops can be plugged in. Again, you can select which one is switched on at the top here. Useful for DJ switchovers, back-to-backs and so on. And then we come to our output section. So you've got 2 master outputs, a balanced XLR output and an unbalanced RCA output, and also a balanced TRS booth output as well. Everything you'd expect, no record output on the back here, just the master and booth. And finally the Kensington lock here to keep your precious REV7 from prying hands. So is the Pioneer DDJ-REV7 for you? Well, what's exciting about this is that now DJs have a clear path from beginner, the little Rev1, it's the same layout as the Rev7 that we're looking at here, from beginner up to a pro controller, which follows the battle layout, the 90-degree turning of the decks, if you like, and the full-size battle mixer in the middle. And then finally up to having turntables or whatever and a standalone mixer. But you know what? I think a lot of DJs will stop when they get to here, because this really, the size, the feel, the convenience, the features, I think a lot of DJs will be quite happy, whatever level they're at, whatever size crowds they play to, whatever they charge for their gigs, will be quite happy to either specify or take with them the Rev7. It's that good. It's that close to using separates that it's pretty amazing. The jog wheels are a massive leap forward for motorized jog wheels, which you have to hand it to Pioneer DJ for a first attempt. That's pretty impressive. The screens are lovely. When the jog wheel is 7 inches, to be able to have a full surface with nothing interrupting it, I think a lot of people are going to appreciate that. And as we said at the beginning, having a full-size mixer is a bit of a game changer. This is a purist device. So if you're used to using CDJs with its big Q button, you'll be like, where's the Q button? Even this one, they've tucked a little Q button down here. They know that this is purist stuff here. You don't get that here, so just bear that in mind. This is only 2 decks. This is 4 decks. You can control 4 decks in Serato with this. This isn't. So, you know, scratch DJs are like, ha, I don't need 4 decks. I don't use 4 decks. And I don't need a Q button. I don't get a Q button on a turntable. But just to point that out, this is purist. So they've taken away the kind of training wheels off the entry level one there. The one thing that I think is a ball dropped here is that the power, as we saw a second ago, is an external power brick. Come on, it's nearly $2,000. That should have been built in here. It's just something to lose or break, and you try buying another one if you're on the road and you're somewhere where, you know, a power brick like that isn't available. I just think that should have been the old IEC kettle lead in the back. But look, that's the only thing I can find to fault this unit, really. It's an excellent scratch, battle, open format performance controller. It does pretty much everything right, and I think it's going to justifiably be very popular. It is the $1,899 Pioneer DJ DDJ-REV7 for Serato DJ. We have the full DJ Jazzy Jeff performance video that he's made exclusively for us that you can see as well. The link is underneath if you want to go and watch DJ Jazzy Jeff putting this through its paces literally 5 minutes after we put it in front of him. We also have the full written review where we go into a lot more detail about some of the functions that I've quickly shown you here. So if you'd like to see that, again, there is a link underneath. This has been the Digital DJ Tips review of the Pioneer DJ DDJ-REV7 controller. Now get good, get out there, make the moments, and join us. Click the link below if you found this useful.